You want that. You want what we have. You want to live in our country. Well, that's not good enough. That's not a good enough reason. Just wanting it, because we are not required to provide what everyone wants just because they want it. And it seems as if, therefore, that the political crisis of losing control of your own country is still generations away. It isn't. And I sense that we're dealing with not only one, but a couple generations that have no sense of the future, have no faith in there being a future. And that sounds apocalyptic on the one hand, but it's also lazy. But this ideology is not going away. It is deeply entrenched in our institutions in both our countries. And I am concerned that in order to dislodge it, we may have to go through some kind of catastrophe.
Hello and welcome to a GB News Originals interview. I'm Will Kingston. My guest today is journalist, iconoclast, and the esteemed author of We Need to Talk About Kevin and most recently, A Better Life, Lionel Shriver. Lionel, welcome.
I feel welcome, thank you.
As welcome as you can feel in the GB News dungeon in Westminster.
It's pretty dismal.
Hopefully we will light it up with this interview. Whenever I'm interviewing an author, I always try and think of a clever first question, and they always just want to ask, or want to be asked, I should say, what's the book about? So what's the book about?
In a word, immigration. More words? It's set in New York City during the Biden open borders era, when New York was inundated with literally hundreds and thousands of migrants coming up from the southern border. And the then mayor of New York had proposed in 2023 that in order to deal with these people, let's pay New Yorkers to put migrants up in their own spare bedrooms. For some reason, that policy never came to pass. Maybe someone whispered in the mayor's ear that something might go wrong. But it did come to pass in my book. So it's a novel about a family in Brooklyn that takes in one Honduran immigrant, or one to begin with, and what happens. And it's all seen through the eyes of a young man of 26 who's graduated from university, has a degree in electrical engineering, but hasn't done anything with it, and has simply gone home, and he has done perfectly nothing for 4 years and has every intention of doing perfectly nothing for the rest of his life.
And that theme around the feeling of a lack of purpose and direction amongst young men is one of several, I guess, secondary themes that you would call them in the book, which I also want to get to. But let's start with immigration, because it is the focal point of the novel. I think in terms of the factual underpinning of the book and a lot of the consequences of mass migration, I was aware of those reading it. I guess that's kind of my job. What I had not read before, at least I had not come across this, which really was quite a visceral response that I had to this book, is the feeling that comes with mass migration. You can tell me the numbers, you can tell me the economic impacts, you can tell me the impacts on crime, or in the UK, the NHS. I get all that intellectually. I think what the book does so well is to create that sense of the feeling that comes when your home or your hometown is changed before your eyes. And that's something which I guess fiction can do in a way that listening to a podcast or watching the news just can't do to the same extent. How did you go about cultivating that feeling of what it feels like to have a town which you love, New York City or Brooklyn, and then have it change in such a short period of time?
Well, I've been through that. In fact, I've been through that twice, because New York is my U.S. base. I go back in the summer, and while it's had an immigrant population for some time, the original immigrant population was all European, or almost all European, and there was a huge change in the last 25 years. so that the integrated, what we now call the white population, we don't call them immigrants anymore. I have an immigrant background. Pretty much everyone in the U.S. does. But when I was born, we had abandoned calling people like me German Americans. We were just Americans. By the way, that was the result of not letting immigrants in between 1924 and 1965. So we had blended into a genuinely united states.
Of course, also, it is easier to blend in someone coming, are you family, for example, coming from a European background, coming from Germany, for example, and Honduras, and the cultural differences are
Americans'
explained.
heritage is European. It's specifically, it's Anglo, right? I mean, we were founded by the English. So it makes perfect sense that immigrants from a similar civilizational background, Judeo-Christian, would blend in pretty quickly. And they did. But we have let in huge numbers of Hispanics, especially coming up from Central America and South America, and of course Mexico, and most recently have let in only about half of Hispanic population. The other half is from everywhere. I mean, everywhere. But the Biden administration just opened the floodgates. So, I have been through watching New York completely change. And only 37% of the population is now white native-born residents. It's almost perfectly the case with London, where I lived the rest of the year for 24 years. And those 24 years was that post-Blair period where London just completely changed and is now a majority minority. And so little by little, it feels, I was already an immigrant, and I was happy to meet the English, the British halfway. I did everything I could to assimilate. I always was respectful of the fact that I was an American and that I could be too presumptuous. Little by little, I probably did get more presumptuous. But after all, I lived in Britain longer than a lot of Britons have lived in Britain. So you say, how do I get inside the emotional experience? Well, it is my emotional experience. And it's especially the case that when I go back to New York, that technically I'm going home, but it sure doesn't feel that way. And there are whole areas of town that it's not that it's not exactly that you're not welcome, but you don't fit in, and you feel you stand out, and it isn't your area.
You said in the book, through the narrator, for the first time since the fiasco began, Nico found himself not simply disliking illegal immigration, but also disliking the migrants themselves. Have you personally, as you have lived in New York City and London, found yourself actively going that next step from disliking the concept of illegal immigration to resenting illegal migrants themselves as they take on a more predatory behavior, which is the word that you use at moments in the book?
I have to confess that, yes, it has gradually become more personal. After all, and my protagonist Nico weighs this out. When you make a conscious decision to break into another country, and not only that, but to throw yourself on the mercy of its welfare system and avail yourself of programs that were originally intended for people who lived there and their children, people who had contributed to the system, or whose parents, whose ancestors had been contributors. Well, that is an act of aggression, and it is a kind of stealing, and it is done with forethought. So you can really hold these people individually accountable. The dinghies full of young men in their 20s and 30s rocking up in the United Kingdom. Each one of those individual people decided to prey on the British taxpayer. And it's premeditated criminal behavior. And so why shouldn't you feel that they are accountable personally?
This is perhaps an obvious question since I'm quoting the title of the book back at you, but many people would suggest they're just coming for a better life in the same way that so many immigrants in the past, to your point, have come for a better life. I imagine many people listening to the language you've just used and using the book, which can sound quite hostile, would be offended by what you've just said.
Oh, doubtless. And that's why almost nobody says this, right? Your sympathy is supposed to go out to people who are less advantaged than you. But I'm restricting my sympathy on purpose, partly because nobody else seems to have any sympathy for the native-born population. And it's, first of all, I do believe in the nation state. So I believe in the right of the residents of a nation state to defend their own interests before extending their generosity to others. Now, it's if the popular will desperately wants to give taxpayer money to non-citizens, all right. But as we know, the British as a whole do not wish to, and they don't have any choice. And they vote time and time again to please restrict immigration. We've had enough. This is too much, too fast, and it doesn't work. Nothing happens. And I share their exasperation. This is involuntary charity.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code, an account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just live in credit. Whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponize against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
I want to follow up on the use of language, both on the right and on the left. And again, quoting from the book, his mother, Nico, your protagonist's mother, and her ilk tended to erect linguistic taboos around the truth. You couldn't call an unprecedented influx of foreigners an invasion because that's what it was. If it weren't an invasion, the word wouldn't upset them so much. Tell me how the left have continued to use linguistic taboos to obfuscate around the truth in the way that you've just presented.
They have a way of coming up with little sayings that are flagrantly untrue, and they think that if they say them often enough, they will become true because they want them to be true. So a good example is no human is illegal. Yes, they are. It's as simple as that. Your present here is illegal. That's just a neat little phrase, but it's not only meaningless, it is flat out wrong. Or that business of trans women are women. No, they're not. They're absolutely not men and not women. They are men, right? So it's this constant recitation of homilies that they think that we will swallow them because we have been brainwashed by this kind of propaganda. But it's worth taking a look at that propaganda, at the language. And by the way, I would call your attention to the title of my book, because that is indeed what you're told over and over again. They only want a better life. I did a column recently for The Spectator on analyzing this expression. So what does it really mean to want a better life? Well, the truth is, everything we do is motivated by a desire for a better life. Now, if we go buy a package of oranges at the supermarket, then our life is going to be better with oranges. And if we don't think it's going to be better, we decide we don't want oranges and we don't buy them. You marry someone because you think it's going to make your life better. You get a different job because you think your life is going to be better. Maybe their property prices are lower in the new city. Whatever. The point is that they only want to come here for a better life is simply a reformulation of they want this. It's just a way of saying, I want this. I want to come to your country. My life will be better. I want it. Now, we do not ordinarily say just because somebody wants something that we give it to them. Otherwise, shoplifting would be legal, right? We put conditions on whether or not you get something. So that if you want a fancy car, then you have to earn the money for it, or we're not going to give it to you. And we, back when we believed in our own immigration policies, we also put conditions on whether or not we let you into our country. So it's all very well. You want that. You want what we have. You want to live in our country. Well, that's not good enough. That's not a good enough reason. Just wanting it, because we are not required to provide what everyone wants just because they want it.
There's a subset of small L liberal or left-wing activists who genuinely believe that they are being generous, they're being kind, and that is the right thing. That's the right thing to do. There's another lovely little line. Nico's mother was naturally generous. Unfortunately, she mostly exercised her magnanimity. Let me try that again. Magnanimity on people she'd never met. It's a really interesting insight. Why, in so many occasions, do we see this level of generosity from NGOs, from governments, from people that go towards foreign citizens, and yet you will hear of people who are sleeping rough, who are citizens of a country, or in this instance even, showing perhaps less generosity to one's own son than to a newcomer in their house. Where does that strange, I'm going to say, paradox come from?
Well, in the progressive landscape, your heart only goes out to the other, to people you don't know. It's impersonal, and therefore it's comfortable. They think in this way of thinking, it makes them better. It's rather than defending your own countrymen. That's terribly selfish. Whereas if you extend yourself to the disadvantaged and the people who are not a part of your in-group, then that is by definition virtuous. My biggest objection to this perspective is that these are people, especially in these NGOs, who are helping huge numbers of people come into our countries, often illegally, and setting them up with benefits and everything from systems that they have not contributed to. these people are being generous on behalf of others who have not agreed to that generosity. So it's one thing to give away your own money and your own time, and fair enough. If you want to go to another country and give them your resources, your personal resources, I have no problem with that. But these people are volunteering our resources.
And I imagine so much of that as well comes down to social status as well, and the way
It's
that
hugely a status game.
yeah. And interestingly, something which I couldn't help but notice in the book, which I imagine is deliberate, is the way that particular female characters think about social status and the way that some of the male characters think about social status. There is a gender divide in the book, and I think you're speaking to a gender divide in our politics more generally at the moment. Talk to me about how that lens plays out.
Well, women are often in competition with each other over who can seem more compassionate. You know, everything I've said to you today would not win me any favors with these people. I mean, I've done nothing but cover myself in shame, right? Because everything I've just said is antithetical to their way of thinking. It's not compassionate, right? I tripped across somebody's comment under a book review that came out recently. And this person, I guarantee you, was a female, said that she read one of my columns about immigration in the Spectator, and she'd never read anything so cruel. So what I'm saying sounds cruel. No, it sounds it is. I would call it hard. That is, I believe in the enforcement of the law. And I also believe in loyalty to your nearest group, your family, then your neighborhood, your city, your country, and then way out there in a very weak way, all of humanity. But that's normal. That's emotionally normal. And something odd has happened with the female progressive mindset, whereby their sense of emotional loyalty is to all of humanity out here, all those people that they haven't met, and then decreasingly toward their own countrymen, their own region. It's a little perverse, but it is definitely a performance.
By suggesting something weird has happened, you are suggesting that this has been a change in recent years, as in liberal Karens, to use the parlance of our time, haven't always been this way. What has generated that change?
You know, I can't tell you. Honestly, I find that difficult to enlighten, but that men and women seem to have politically split off. And it's I don't think it is entirely among the young. It's also among the middle-aged. Gloria in the book, the mother, is very typical. She's divorced. She spends a lot of time with other women. You notice she basically doesn't ever hang out with men, and they're in a kind of political cocoon, and there's a lot of moral display, showing, I care so much. And you see this in the ICE protests. It's protests that are trying to actually interfere with the enforcement of immigration law and removing people from the country who have no permission to be there. And immigration brings out all kinds of sentimentality, and those ICE raids are a good example. And there's in the United States especially, there is a very wobbly relationship to the enforcement of immigration laws. Before the election, I was astonished by the figures of deporting every single illegal immigrant in the country. It was 67%. So that was including a lot of Democrats, because that you'd have to. Every single one of them. But now that Trump gets around to actually deporting people, a surprisingly large proportion of the electorate is queasy.
Is that just the optics? Is that just because
It's
they
the
actually
optics,
see them?
and also it's because it becomes personalized. And this was inevitable. I saw it coming. Now, once Trump was elected, I thought, if he follows through at all, then we're going to see article after article and package after package on the TV news of these lovely people and their and their adorable children, and and working 2 jobs illegally. I mean, it's very persuasive because it's tugging at your heartstrings. The enforcement of the law is not a sentimental business, and you often end up arresting people who maybe did something bad but have lovely families. We don't let them go if they've burglarized the neighborhood, just because they have cute children. But somehow Americans especially, are very weak-kneed and soft-hearted when it comes to deportation. It's like, oh, this doesn't look good, seems mean. And I'm sure it feels mean, and it makes a lot of people unhappy. But you either believe in enforcing the law or you don't.
You would be aware that in the United Kingdom, the emerging range of right-wing parties from Reform, the Conservatives, Restore, the new Rupert Lowe party, have all talked about mass deportations.
Yes.
What are the lessons that those parties can draw from the ICE experience in the United States if they actually want to successfully implement those policies?
Well, there's certain optics about that operation that we could learn from. Don't make it too military. I don't like the fact that they're wearing what look like almost army uniforms. But honestly, the biggest lesson is it is murder to get rid of people once they have settled in your country. And that it's difficult politically, and because the same sentimentality will be stirred here if they ever do get around to deporting some people in any quantity whatsoever. You're going to get the same backlash, and even in the middle of the political spectrum, you're going to get the same. I don't know. I thought I supported this, but these seem like nice people, and really, we're going to send them home. It's not nice there. So it's politically difficult, but it's logistically difficult. Finding them, rounding them up. It's extremely expensive. I am not persuaded there are only 1 million illegal immigrants in the United Kingdom. I bet it's a lot higher. The statistics on this in both our countries are appallingly weak. For at least 25, maybe 30 years in the U.S., American journalists were quoting this figure that there were 11 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Well, it's just impossible that static figure that was always accurate. Whereas in 2018, they did a study at Yale looking at other metrics, using a computer to estimate how many illegal immigrants there were. And this is before the Biden wave. It was anywhere from about 20 million to 35 million. So I would say it's probably about 50 million now. So the figures here are weak, poorly supported. You can assume that's probably at least twice as bad.
Well, they're also often driven by an agenda as well.
Right. So yes, the figures are often kind of fiddled for a reason. So this is not all statistics on immigration are untrustworthy. But you're not, deporting millions of people is extremely expensive and complex, and I am skeptical that this country can ever do it. So the lesson from that is, don't let them in the first place. So the most important thing to do is to close the door. And by the way, here, as we know, that means stop letting in so many legal migrants.
Yep. I wanted to, well, your book covers a range of the ills of our time above and beyond just immigration, and I want to get to some of those. But before we do, let's put this in the context of British politics today as we speak in February 2026. There is a by-election in the United Kingdom tomorrow where that particular part of Manchester in many ways is a microcosm of the ills and the problems associated with immigration in this country. And I guess my question would be, how have you reflected on that particular by-election? And then more generally, what do you think it says about the politics in the United Kingdom today?
Well, I'm sure the results will be known by the time this goes out.
Mm.
But in the press about this election, they published maps of it's a kind of, the constituency is shaped like this. And the whole left arm of that boomerang shape is Muslim. It's fantastically segregated geographically, and it was a visual form of what is really happening all over the UK, ghettoization, and that means that those areas are they're anything but diverse. They are not diverse. They're perfectly homogeneous, but they happen to be Muslim. And these concentrations also, these geographical concentrations, also give this community a lot of political power, which is what we're seeing play out in Manchester. Because the Greens, which have absolutely nothing in common with the Islamic community, nothing. In fact, they couldn't be more opposite, but they are courting the Muslim vote in a way that I think we can see in future happening all the time. That you have parties fighting over who gets the Muslims and therefore who makes them happier, who is really supporting a de facto blasphemy law, for example, who wants to make a law about how you can't deface the Quran, and that, I think it's an illustration of the fact that the Brits who are up to date on what's happening demographically in this country will probably know that by 2063, white Britons are likely to become a minority in their own country. And it seems as if, therefore, that the political crisis of losing control of your own country is still generations away. It isn't, because all you need is a substantial swing vote to control who's in Westminster, who runs your local council, because you get this vying for this community vote. And this is especially the case with a community that votes as a bloc.
Why is that a problem for the United Kingdom or England to become minority white or Anglo-Saxon? Pick your preferred term.
The thing with dealing with this issue with progressives is that they profess that they're perfectly happy for their own countries to become minority white, minority Europeans, that's actually a good thing, that because they think that minorities especially from developing countries, a nice word for poor countries, that these are somehow morally superior, which I reject out of hand, but that's their premise. So they regard the point at which our countries become majority minorities as worthy of celebration. I'm more old-fashioned, and I think that not only does any culture have the right to preserve itself, but that if you reverse the situation and you had a lot of Europeans, say Britons, pouring once more into Kenya, right, taking over Nairobi as as London has been taken over, that would be that the left would find that an absolute outrage.
Yeah.
You know, that would be settler colonialism.
Yeah, I've always found that to be not a bizarre double standard, because I understand it in that it just comes down to white guilt and the historic narrative of oppression that they are trying to right the wrong for.
I was just gonna add, there are parts of Mexico which are now getting a substantial American immigrant settlement, and the Mexicans are enraged. They hate it. Mexico City has a lot of digital nomads from the United States, and especially the coast has substantial numbers of American retirees, and they are widely resented with no sense of irony.
Yeah. I want to go back to that one comment you made just before, which was there's nothing that binds together the, if we say the Islamo-Communist alliance, the Islamo bit and the communist bit. And I would suggest maybe the one thing that does tie them together is this desire to tear down Western civilization. That is the one thing that is holding
That is
together.
absolutely what they've got in common.
But it doesn't feel like that in and of itself in the long term is sustainable for that political project when you are pulling together socially regressive Muslims and socially progressive far left liberals.
Oh yeah,
that can't sustain.
This is an alliance of convenience. It does really intrigue me that the progressive left, the wokesters, if you will, want to tear down their own societies, and they never regard themselves as part of those societies and as potential victims of their own destruction. It's mystifying to me. These are the same people who make, large, vicious generalizations about white people and don't believe that those generalizations that pertain to them, though they're white people. I mean, it's just, it's a kind of double think, or I don't know, maybe a better word for it is stupidity.
I want to move to, for me, what was the most powerful theme in the book, actually, and it's not the primary theme, it's, I guess, a secondary theme that runs through the book via the character of Nico, and that is the purposelessness of so many young men today. And you framed it as a studied neutrality, a type of neutrality that is almost, worn like a cloak. Tell me what you mean by a sense of neutrality that many young men are putting on today in absence of a deeper purpose.
Nico, my protagonist, through whom we see this entire story, is someone who has just decided not to play the game, right? You can't lose if you don't play the game. He's opted out. He has decided that his greatest ambition is to have no ambition. He is not planning for a future that varies in the slightest from his present, which is living in his mother's house.
It's quite a nice line you use. In truth, Nico's imagination simply cut out circa 2030, by which time he's envisaged a last pure white page in a book that leaves off mid-sentence.
Yes. And I sense that we're dealing with not only one, but a couple generations that have no sense of the future, have no faith in there being a future. And that sounds apocalyptic on the one hand, but it's also lazy. Because when you embrace an apocalyptic vision, you don't have to plan for the future. Everything's going to fall apart, so there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you're called to do. You can stay in your mother's basement. It's a kind of short-sightedness, because the chances are very good there will be a future. It's impossible to know what it is. That's what's so weird about the future. Anything could happen, but we do seem to have a surprisingly large proportion of younger people who simply don't have faith that they can be a part of society, that they can fashion a future for themselves that is palatable, that future is worth the effort, right? Because the bottom line is we need to go back to first principles. And this is difficult because it does feel as if maybe that means it's going backwards. In other words, young men need to get out of their parents' house, get a job, get married, and have children. And, you know, as a child of the 1960s, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it was my generation that convinced everyone that this was old hat and we didn't need to do any of these things.
I think young people generally are feeling this. Many young people are feeling this, but I think you're right to identify it as a primarily, not exclusively, but primarily a young male phenomena. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, we've done everything we can socially and culturally to discourage young men. And I should clarify that my protagonist, Nico, I'm very sympathetic with him. And I think you can feel it in the book.
You can.
I definitely see his perspective. He lives in a matriarchy. He with his mother and two older sisters who kind of gang up. He talks about the women, capital T, capital W, and who dominate him. And don't really take him seriously. I mean, they think he should do something, but he's the the permanently little brother, and he lives, but he also lives in a larger feminized universe. Our culture has gone to the women, capital T, capital W, and therefore we don't admire what men have always been good for. Now, I'm actually a big proponent of both men and traditional masculinity. It doesn't mean, go rape gangs or something, but there is a place for properly channeled aggression when it's applied to the right circumstance, to physical strength, to mental strength, to intellectual strength, to drawing a line and saying, well, you may have emotion on your side, but I have reason on mine, because women are too ready to abandon things like what we were talking about, enforcement of the rule of law, even if it makes you feel a little guilty. The quality of courage, for example. These are qualities that women can engender as well. So they're not exclusively masculine. But when they are embodied in men, then we poo-poo them. And we have discouraged men from being men. And we've also discouraged men from courting, from being able to make a pass at a woman. I'd hate to be dating today. It's really exciting, that moment when you think, he's going to kiss you and you want him to kiss you. And yet, traditionally, the man has to make that move. The man doesn't want to make that move anymore.
Yes, you mentioned
he's afraid he's going to be arrested.
Yeah, you mentioned a fake college rape scandal in the book where Nico ends up, after saying that, just going, flesh and blood females were simply too much trouble.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't blame young men for thinking, I don't get the impression these women are interested anyway. They look at me, they think I'm just going to attack them. They don't seem interested in me. There are a lot of, and there are polls that more or less bear this out. Women in general are less interested in getting married, and more interested in just living on their own and fulfilling their various desires. I don't think that's a formula for happiness, personally. I'm married. I like being married. It's worked out for me. And that's what I was saying. I think somehow we have to reinstill the desire for what used to be a normal life. And that also means restoring some regard for and even admiration of the masculine virtues.
Do you share Nico's cynicism about the future, or do you see personally any reasons for optimism?
I'm not convinced that woke is dead.
I agree.
We leapt to some conclusions when Trump was elected, but he wasn't elected over here, and he's only in office for less than 3 more years. They might be interesting years, or catastrophic years. But this ideology is not going away. It is deeply entrenched in our institutions in both our countries. And I am concerned that in order to dislodge it, we may have to go through some kind of catastrophe, whereby we come out the other side realizing that these luxury beliefs of ours, that as Ron Henderson has termed them, we can't afford them anymore. We can't afford that kind of luxury. And we have to get back to basics because we have to start having children or we're going to disappear. And we don't have the kind of money that we used to. So we can't afford to send our children to universities that cost, you know, $200,000-$300,000 for a degree, only to have them taught about critical race theory, and they still can't add. I mean, we can't afford that. We don't have the money. You know, the kind of catastrophe I imagined is often financial, because you know, I'm very attuned to the consequences eventually. We don't know when the national debts are really going to bring us down. So I'm braced for that, and maybe it'll be worth it. I mean, maybe if we have something horrible happen, we will get real on the other side.
Yeah, I increasingly am coming to the same conclusion. Lionel, A Better Life, available in all good bookstores, online. Thank you so much for writing it. I think it's an incredibly important contribution to, for want of a better term, the culture wars, the public debate. And thank you for coming on the show today.
I really enjoyed talking